Hello everyone, I'm back, and today we're going to talk about the basics of being an intelligence officer. Name this one Battalion S-2 101, Key Takeaways and Lessons Learned from a Military Intelligence Career. So this is one I want to just throw on YouTube to give some brand new or even some old S-2s some insight into things that can impact their career and how they can just view their role. So let's get started. This is what it's really all about. When you're an S2, especially for the last, decade plus of the war on terror and deployments, when you do things as an S2, you're going to be given your opinion, which is going to affect life and death matters. And your commander will sometimes look to you if it goes down bad as maybe with some negative repercussions or maybe some sympathy. But this is the part of being any kind of role in a staff as a soldier, is to understand the human cost soldiers play. The intelligence officer in any military organization is going to be called the 2, whether he's the S2 at battalion and brigade level, the G2 at division and corps level, or at the joint level for a joint headquarters is known as the J2. But either way, the term is 2. And this is a nice little quote I pulled from Military Review, copy 1944. The test of a staff officer is whether the best frontline troops, either in battle or work, welcome him because he always helps them. If he thinks he can perform his duties by sitting at a desk writing memos, he is very sadly mistaken. Most of his time should be spent out with the troops of the command to which he belongs. Another thing to remember is intelligence is a team sport. There's no prima donnas, there's no cliques, and there's no lone wolves. And another great fallacy is intelligence personnel think they are chosen people entitled to special privileges and by no means to be confused with soldiers. This is a wrong attitude. So often intel soldiers think that they are extra special because they're super smart, maybe, kind of have an elitist opinion, or they have a top secret security clearance and they think they're better than people without a top secret. So that's something to always keep in mind. Key thing to remember about being an S2 or intelligence officer: information is of no value to anyone unless it is acted upon. And you always have to ask the question, who else needs to know the information? The S2 section never sleeps. It's always manned. It's never off duty. And you always have to be prepared for that. So always go into the operation planning for 24-hour operations. Being an S2 is frequently a thankless job, and it isn't mysterious. There's no cloak and dagger of intelligence work, especially as a S2. Your primary objective of combat intelligence is to reduce, as far as possible, uncertainties regarding the enemy, terrain, and weather, and thus assist the commander in making a decision and the troops in executing their assigned mission. That comes from a U.S. Army After Action Review from World War II. Now, let's say you are a Battalion S2. You're just a little pebble in the great pool, and unless you've had considerable experience at your job, you're inevitably going to go through a period of feeling small and insignificant, and bewilderment and just being lost. But you also have to understand that you're not alone. You will feel alone, but actually you're not. You are a member of a team, and all the others pitch in to help you out in any situation. And if you're just lost and send up an SOS, you can't do your job alone. And I included this picture because On the left you have Battalion 2 talking to his section members, and on the right there you have, I happen to know that guy. He's a Air Force colonel, and that's out of the NORAD Command Center. I used to work in there. But for his role, he's overseeing the entire defense of North America. Both individuals have their place in the system, and everyone in between is working to help each other out. And you have to remember that. Okay, successful S2s will network. Get to know people, make friends with them, go out of your way to do them favors, and they'll go out of the way to do you favors. Circulate and get around. Look and listen, and talk when you have to. When you do talk, say something, then shut up, be friendly, be helpful. Get yourself a reputation for being a good guy or gal, someone who's savvy, who's interested in other people's problems, always ready to lend a hand. An omnipresent, hard-working, and all-around useful citizen. That's what you want to be. Another thing about being an S2 is don't be cocky. Cocky S2s have a habit of being wrong at the most embarrassing moments. Know your job and all its hazards. Never be afraid to give advice when you know it's worth something, but always listen to advice too. It might be good. Cultivate a cordial, easy approach, but in a loft, judicious, fact-weighing frame of mind. Be suspicious of everything, but don't let your suspicions make you personally obnoxious, which they can easily do. The other thing is to be successful on staff. Assuming that you are professionally qualified, the rest of being an Army officer is almost 100% the matter of personal relations. Yes, sons of bitches do get along in the Army, but they have to be near geniuses in one form or another. The average man or woman, however, needs to be likable, thoughtful, cooperative, resourceful, aggressive, and tireless in order to succeed. This is especially true of staff officers who lack the authority of command, yet are expected to accomplish miracles in the world of give and take. Okay, your mission is basically to enable your commander to accomplish his or her mission. That's what it boils down to as being an S2. And again, back to the commander, is the relationship between the S2 and his commander should be, to say it with strength, harmonious and intimate. An S2 will do well to approach his commanding officer in a cooperative and open-minded spirit, looking for his good points rather than his bad ones, being willing to overlook and bolster the latter, understanding that the success of the relationship will depend largely on how much he, the S2, can give to it. This is a very important point because you're going to work for commanders that you hate and commanders that you like and respect. If you're with a commander you hate, you need to just get the hell out of the unit as fast as humanly possible, because it won't work. There has to be an ongoing, cooperative, again, harmonious and intimate, appeal between the commander and his intelligence officer. Okay, same approach is with the between the S2 and the S3 operation officer. It has been amply proven that the closer these two officers are, the more effective, harmonious, and successful will be their unit. There is nothing quite as disruptive as the internecine feud between these vital staff members. And take it from me, this is very, very true. I can give you countless stories about bad relationship between S2s and S3s. Then there's the rest of the staff. The S2 should also remember that the S1, the S4, the S6 belong to the same staff. and they are vitally interested in many phases of intelligence and can provide him with much useful assistance. No military operation, however small, can succeed unless all staff work is coordinated. It is absolutely essential that the various staff officers confide in one another. In short, the S2 is someone with a lot of information which all of the staff needs to know. The S2 must always be willing to volunteer information and to ask for it. Senior leaders is another topic that's near and dear to intelligence officers, because you will be dealing with them all the time. You'll have BCT commanders, the BCT S2, the BCT S3, your division G2, G3, even the CG will pop into your headquarters occasionally. And then at the core and joint levels, it just gets magnified. If these people are to understand your problems, they must come down and see for themselves how your section is getting along. It is up to you to make it worth their while to come down and around. What they want from you is information. Have it for them. Not some long-winded dissertations, but cold facts presented in a brisk, orderly fashion. One method that I used to use is I would have one index card with 3 issues that were of concern to me. And if I, like this gentleman, this 2-star general's coming down, maybe one of those questions is what is important at his level from my foxhole, and I would just let him know that one issue. For G2, it might be another one of those questions. Just always have those ready. Don't go into too great detail and give them long-winded dissertations. They don't want that. It needs to be quick and down and dirty. Sticking with senior leaders, many S2s are not only awed by their commander, but are practically paralyzed at the thought of their senior leaders. This is a silly and destructive attitude. And this you'll see mostly with brand new junior officers, second and first lieutenants, who are intimidated by rank. And the way around this is just remember that you too are a good person, and you wouldn't be wearing that rank on your shoulders if you weren't. And the senior leaders, they know you're good. They expect all their junior officers to be upstanding officers and citizens unless proven wrong. And so you're there to comply with their expectations of what they see. So don't get intimidated by them. Again, they're there to listen to you and get your input. Another thing to talk about with S2s and their sections is you have to know the tools you have. And basically they come in 2 forms. You have physical tools and you have human tools. Physical, you're going to have maps, computers, acetate, markers, vehicles, and they're all physical things. And then you're going to have people. You know, you're going to literally your people in your shop, and you're going to have like tables of organization and your manning issues, which are all human issues. At all echelons of intelligence from G2 to Department of Defense right down the line are all in the business primarily to supply you and your fellow S2s with the information your commanding officer and his troops need to defeat the enemy. Okay, we're going to shift gears and go into ISR now and IPB. Now, many S2s put a little too much emphasis on IPB and a little less on ISR. And as the intelligence officer, they need to pretty much reverse that. IPB is important, and you have to do correct IPB and good IPB because, again, the point of your IPB is to get to your ISR plan. You can't do a competent ISR plan without competent IPB, but often S2s do their IPB, they'll do a great job of it, and then they kind of just half-ass and wing the ISR portion because it's at the end of the process and they're tired, or they have the S-3 commander breathing down their neck. But the key point is have your S-2 section of your soldiers and NCOs work on your IPB, you review it, but as S-2 officer, you want to be primarily focused on the ISR, because like my comment there says, professionals talk ISR. When that 2-star general comes down to talk, he's generally not going to ask you about IPB. Generally, he's going to ask about ISR or collections, and you have to be ready with those kind of answers. Let's talk the intelligence estimate. In my early career, in the olden days, the intelligence estimate was a typewritten document. Then it kind of moved into a Word document, and it analyzed, everything from the weather, terrain, to enemy, to courses of action. In later years, it shifted mainly to a PowerPoint document, which it's good because a lot of commanders like the visual graphic. But I'll give a plug for the written estimate, because when you write an estimate, it actually gives you a little bit of better analytical analysis of the enemy and the problems that you face, because you're actually, have to put your thoughts together on paper, and it makes you do a little bit better analysis, in my opinion. Order battle. Order battle is almost a lost science that has been rediscovered with the current date doctrine that's reemerging. Back in the old coin days, there wasn't a lot of order battle analysis. Order battle is actually pretty difficult if done right, and it's also a little bit labor intensive. So generally, intelligence section at the brigade and G2 level have to dedicate a couple of their really smart analysts, often the warrant officer, to do this kind of analysis. Years ago, the all-source warrant officer was known as the OB tech, the order battle tech, which kind of gives you a hint of what the level of importance of analyzing order battle was. So now we're going to talk the intel cycle of planning and directing, collecting and producing and disseminating. You really need to get these down cold to be an effective intelligence officer at battalion and higher. Wanted to throw this one little comment in here, and that is, this is from one of my friends from Iraq, a fellow intel officer. The key to successful ISR is following the intelligence cycle. So, and he is absolutely true here, because if you just go with the tasks that are being laid out on this, you can see them in the smaller bullet points, and you can almost use them as a checklist. And if you follow that checklist during real operations, and then follow the cycle back around, you will be very successful. The issue is when you don't follow all these steps in the cycle, you're generally going to miss something, which you don't want to do. Okay. Another, we'll still talk ISR here a bit. Primarily rely on your own organic assets. Even if you're like some support unit S2 and you only have, you're the, support battalion, and you got trucks on convoys. Do the convoy debriefing and stuff. Because higher echelon assets, you can't always rely on them. And if you put all your eggs in the higher echelon asset basket, you're going to get screwed at some point. And then again, there is a difference between reconnaissance and surveillance plans and collections plans. They're not the same thing, so do them both. It's a little time consuming. And don't expect an even distribution of the ints, because you're just not going to get an even distribution. I know doctrinally you should, and they always have the intelligence synchronization matrix, and you have to have everything lined up with an even amount of ints, but generally you're not going to have enough of the higher level assets to give you that. So just primarily rely on your own assets, because you control them, and through you, the commander, and the three, you can do a really good collection plan. So just keep that in mind. If you have the higher level stuff, yeah, use it. Okay. The other thing is just focus on the fact that dissemination of information is key. And I'll just go down some tips and pointers here. Every intelligence officer must be dissemination conscious. That's because you have customers who want your information, and it's your job to get to them. Okay, information must be disseminated first to the parties immediately affected. Okay, dissemination is not complete until it has reached all echelons and all agencies concerned. That's where follow-up phone calls are the standard. You don't shoot off an email, you call them to close the loop. Previous dissemination must be included with the information transmitted, because again, you want to give them the really the so what, and you're going to get that from including previous dissemination. Evaluation and interpretation must be disseminated as well as the information itself. What do we mean by that? As a 2, you got to give your little analysis of what you make of the information. And personal contact, if at all possible, to gain it, and always best means of disseminating information. As a 2, I used to hand carry stuff in Iraq. I'd follow the commander around, and I'd go visit other headquarters, take stuff to them, and then I'd be able to get stuff from them right in my hot little hand. Train your section to pass on the information they acquire. This is a continuous process. And this is an old phrase from World War II. Push the pertinent poop promptly. So, again, another World War II AAR. And again, the reason I throw in World War II AARs is biggest war in history. A lot of great intelligence work was done, and we can't forget those historical lessons learned. Okay, we're going to talk security really briefly, because in garrison and even in the field, security is huge to the S-2. That's your lane, and your commander's going to expect you to know it inside and out. And so the security discipline is frequently violated in small ways, and we all know that little bits of information can build up to the picture. So even little bits of unclassified can build up to classified information. And the 2 common failings are loose talk and carelessness online. As a S-2, you should limit the number of classified documents to a minimum. Very important. The more stuff you have floating around, the more it's going to get out. I've experienced these issues my own way, so I can speak from experience. Commanding officers have overall responsibility for maintenance of security, and commanding officers are themselves the most frequent violators of security. Can't tell you how true that is. But you have to be aware of that as a 2. Your commander's going to grab some secret document and stick it in his pocket and go walking out the door. You have to be ready to just politely, prevent him or her from doing that. Security clearances. The S-2 is a subject matter for the unit on security clearances. So you're going to want to know how the SF-86 form is filled out, because they'll come to you with questions. They're going to ask you how to do it, and you've done it yourself, obviously, but you're going to need to know, the best answers when they have questions for you. Then there's blotters and offenses, another thing that S2 has to know a lot about. And the key thing is most people on staff will see a blotter and they're just going to skim it and just go off on a tangent. You want to be able to, again, be the level-headed, calm, fact-weighing individual who looks at a blotter and can see, what the offenses really are. Because again, you can be messing with soldiers' careers if you just take a blotter and make an assumption about, the offenses. That was it really an offense, or was it something that was alleged and there was no merit to it? The issue of intent and suspending and revoking of clearances is huge. You have to really understand the difference between suspend and revoke, and how often to work to, either get a clearance unrevoked or unsuspended, because often your commander will come to you and say, Sergeant Snuffy's the best NCO in the unit and I want him to have a clearance. And now you have to figure out, how do I get Sergeant Snuffy's clearance unsuspended or unrevoked? A rule of thumb is, for especially a revocation, you're going to have to have your commander approach the first general officer in your chain of command with a letter of recommendation suggesting why said soldier needs to have his clearance based on whatever offense he committed. That's the rule of thumb. Sometimes it'll work with the 06, but my experience has been you need a 1-star to sort it out. And it all depends on what the offense was too. So rebuttal process, that kind of goes into my comment I just said about using a general officer to rebut, and that's where senior leaders get involved. So just keep that all in mind. Okay, security. Again, the other aspect of security is with counterintelligence. And when we talk counterintelligence as a S2, we're not talking about the agent so much. We're talking about just passive security and the measure you have in place. Intelligence personnel are largely held responsible, but the implementation is a function of every soldier. Often it's a 3 function, S3, but they will task it on the 2 to, follow up and make sure everything's in place. And then there's also like OPSEC. OPSEC, operational security, is a security measure that falls in the 3's lane, but they usually task to the 2. So you want to be as familiar with the OPSEC process as you can. Okay, let's get on to captured personnel, and because your unit and the soldiers in your unit, they're going to capture people and things. And you got that quote there of some G2 say you get 90% of your usable tactical information during combat from prisoners and documents. Some say 75, some say 50. Key thing is you capture people and things, and you need to know how to process them. And also, as a S2, it is not your responsibility to capture prisoners, and it is not your responsibility to run around collecting scraps of paper. It is your job to see that prisoners are properly questioned at the right time, and that the scraps of papers are turned in, and that something is done with them. And this is one of my little foot stomp moments, but as an intelligence officer, the Law of Land Warfare is the most important book you can read and have a good understanding of in your duties and role as an intelligence officer, because the world of intelligence has a lot of gray lines that officers will cross onto the dark side, and you need to be aware of where those lines are. Now, I understand, I think that's the older version of the book. It still has about 90% of the right discussion points and answers in it. So if that's the version you can read, or if you want the new one, if it's out, it was under draft revisions for like damn near a decade. So if you get your hands on the new one, you're going to notice it's almost written like the UCMJ manual. It is so full of legal speak. This version of FM 2710 is actually very readable, and there's a lot of stuff you will learn in there about the treatment of POWs. And if some of the soldiers who were doing Abu Ghraib had just been aware of the basic features of the law of land warfare, they would have never done any of the atrocities they did in Abu Ghraib. So read and understand the law of land warfare. Okay, linguists, why do we need them? Well, here are just a few of the issues. You're going to interrogate prisoners of war. Then you need someone to read and translate, interpret, evaluate, capture documents. You're going to have OSINT, social media, civil affairs people, communicate with friendly civilians, host nation. The list goes on and on. And then there's always the question that pops up about, should the S-2 know a foreign language? Yes, that is critical. I would say you're not a competent intelligence officer unless you know, or at least work at studying a foreign language. Now, with that said, I would recommend, having fiddled with multiple languages over time, that you're better off just finding whatever language you're interested in, be it Japanese, Chinese, Arabic, Italian, even if it's some mundane non-threat nation like Italian, that you're interested in, because you're going to, in the course of your career, you're going to work with other nations, especially if you make a career of it. You're going to, if Italian is what you're interested in because you want to travel to Italy and like all sorts of cool stuff about Italy, at some point in your career, you're going to be rubbing elbows with Italian officers. I have. I lose track of how many different nationalities I've worked with in my career. So the key thing is knowing a foreign language. And if it's one that you're interested in, then yeah, you're going to be more attuned to learning it. If you want to learn Arabic, but you hate everything about Arabic culture, you're kind of wasting your time. That's where you rely on your interpreters. And if you, for whatever reason, like a different language, learn that one and know it well, because there will be a time when it will be put to use. So that's my 2 cents. Okay, let's talk GEOINT. Key thing to remember is GEOINT is, you're going to have a team at brigade and a team at division that you can rely on to go have products produced and made. So don't be shy about going up and seeing them. And these are the various items for various intelligence missions that you may need products for. Some of the key ones are I&W, mission planning, mission command products, targeting, BDA. So just keep those in mind. Human intelligence. Okay, this is your human collectors who are trained people to collect intelligence information. As a S-2, generally you don't see these guys, especially in a date environment, but you see them a lot in a COINT environment. Counterinsurgency. Just make sure they're taken care of, and you use them because they're valuable assets. Just to talk some hot button topics, in the counterinsurgency, a lot of times they had relaxed grooming standards, which would set commanders off, like why they have a mustache. Um, you know, generally let them do their job and just defend them when it comes to things like grooming standards. Dress standards come in because sometimes they're authorized to put on civilian clothes. Or they'll do stuff like they'll throw on officer rank when they're dealing with an Iraqi senior officer. So just be aware of that. And then don't mess with them because sometimes they're doing source operations and you don't want to mess up their mission. So just keep that in mind. If you can get on the list of reporting that they do, then do that. You're only going to do that if you follow the rules about being someone who's easy to work with that we discussed at the beginning of this presentation. Counterintelligence. Generally, you won't see these guys a lot. If you do, it's usually a very serious incident revolving around espionage, but then there's also force protection. Sometimes they do missions similar to humidors, but just make sure you keep the division of duties in your mind separate and don't confuse them. Okay, signals intelligence, otherwise known as SIGINT, and then the other ints that come along like comment, communications intelligence, electronic intelligence, ELINT, or foreign instrument signals intelligence, VISINT. Just you won't play with these assets at battalion S2 level, but you have to be aware of how they operate. And some of this you learn in the basic course as a lieutenant, but just constantly be learning as these guys interact with you and learn as much as you can about this field. And then open source intelligence. This is a relatively new field. We used to do this all on our own as S2s back when the internet was brand new, but it's come very far and it is very important, but it also has various rules associated with it. So try and get trained up through Foundry and other good intel sources for OSINT training. And then you have the intelligence community. And I'll just talk briefly, but you basically need to know who all these organizations are and what they provide. National Ground Intelligence Center provides information about threat weapons, equipment, tanks, artillery, all that kind of stuff. But they also do good reports about NBC capabilities and a certain level of other material. Then Defense Intelligence Agency, they do really good assessments on foreign militaries. NGA, National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, they provide GEOINT. You also have INSCOM, and then I'll just talk MCIA because MCIA is great because they do all those little country handbook and threat books. They are a great resource that you can get to online. So, okay, the other thing to remember about the intelligence community that I'll call the IC is that they're there to help you. Everyone in the IC is there to support the warfighter, but this is a very important point. They view the warfighter as that 4-star general sitting at CENTCOM or EUCOM or PACOM. That is their definition of the warfighter, not you, some battalion S2 in the field. You fall under the warfighter, that 4-star commander. So just you have to understand they have 1,000 feet view of the battle, not your little, kilometer by kilometer view of the battle. They do countless products and they have huge resources, but you need to know where to look and who to reach out in the intel community. Know what assets they have, and understand that you can do unofficial coordination and dialogue with them. That is highly encouraged. And if you talk to IC members, never like task them or imply production, because that is a huge thing. Everything that they do is official. So if you tell them to make you a report, I mean that they're gonna ask the 4-star command why some battalion S2 is asking them stuff. But if you keep it kind of on the unofficial coordination, just dialoguing with them, that's okay, and they will help you out with favors. They don't have to, but just if you're being a very agreeable officer, people are there to help. So just keep that in mind, and we'll talk more on this. And here's my example. This is a product from the National Ground Intelligence Center. It's back from the Ukraine crisis, an unclassified document. And this is something that was produced, and it's talking about the Russian tank markings and like what units use what markings, which is a great product an S2 would want. Now I had this thing and I thought it was a great document, and I wanted to talk to the guy because I had a few other questions that I wanted to sort out. So the page 2 of this document went and it talked about the sources. And if you look at the sources on the right, and I blocked them out because, even though they're unclassified, they're still sensitive. But they came with hyperlinks on GEOINT that I could like follow and go to. And then on the left, it actually had the guy's name and all his contact information that I could reach out and talk to. And I did. I, emailed him on SIPR and GEOINT. Then called him, had his telephone number, and again, as you can see, there's his address, his GEOINT email, his SIPR email, his NIPR email, and his telephone number. So you can actually reach out to these people and ask some questions, and they're usually more than willing to answer your questions. And they might send you something that they're working on if you treat them, respectfully. They will point you in other directions. So, but again, the key point is you can't task them with anything. You can't officially request, and if you don't get an email with a product, you can't complain, say, hey, how come you didn't send me that email? It's like they don't have to. They're just doing it out of the kindness of their heart. But 90% of the time, they will help you out. So that's a great resource. Okay, closing thoughts. My point is read history. Also read history that's not American. Read other allied countries' military histories, your enemy's military history, or even just general history to understand the culture. You need to read about foreign policy, because generally foreign policy, when it starts going south, is when conflicts occur, and that's when you get involved as a military. You need to really study the IC, the intelligence community, and understand how it works, because as you move up in rank, you'll find your life easier if you know how to deal with the echelons as you're achieving those echelons and working at them. And then study doctrine. This really is a plug to the S3s and the rest of the staffs out there. But when you're dealing with your counterparts on staff, you need to understand the doctrine, whether it's Army doctrine or joint doctrine. So that was key takeaways and lessons learned from an MI career. I hope you enjoyed. If you like this, click subscribe.